Professor Koo, the United States maintains a number of sanctions, export controls, or other measures to prevent certain individuals or entities affiliated with an adversarial nation from gaining access to strategic technologies or preventing equipment produced by such persons from being utilized in sensitive U.S. industries. A lot of times the sanctions include restrictions on certain property rights, and generally, however, these do not apply to a sanctioned entity's patent portfolio, meaning a sanctioned entity can continue to license its patents to U.S.-based companies or assert them in court. Some see the circumvention of sanctions and the subsidization of the activities of a sanctioned entity. So let me ask you, why have IP rights generally been excluded from other property rights restrictions under U.S. sanctions? And how could adversarial nations like China, which I know we've been talking about, take advantage of that loophole to the detriment of the U.S. innovation, or obviously the other thing discussed is our national security?
This is a complicated question. I agree with you that it's a strange thing. Obviously, it depends on how we design our sanctions regime, which this body, Congress, has designed, but also which is implemented by the Commerce Department. You could have sanctions that are much stricter and that are completely across the board, which in some cases would prevent, even intellectual property licensing from occurring. I think that what's going on here is that people have, the Commerce Department or other entities essentially try to make compromises to account for different interests, right? The licensing is very valuable, right? It's very valuable for U.S. companies in many cases. To lose that revenue is a substantial and significant cost. So I think there's no legal reason why we cannot impose such rules across the board. I think it's more of a practical problem of balancing the different economic and political interests that we have here in the United States.
Thank you. Ms. De La Bruyere, you've written extensively on China's military-civil fusion, I guess you'd call it. And China has utilized companies like Huawei and ZTE to advance its Made in China 2025 initiative, or plan, I guess you'd call it. So Huawei held over 3,300 active U.S. patents in 2024, which is unbelievable to me. And it's generating the company hundreds of millions of dollars in annual licensing revenue. So when we allow some of these state-sponsored companies like Huawei to profit off the U.S. patent system, either through licensing agreements or injunctions, I mean, obviously we're subsidizing the continued kind of theft of American intellectual property, and certainly helping to advance China's industrial agenda. What should Congress do about this, if anything, considering the limiting and licensing of asserting the U.S. patents while on certain national security-related sanctions lists?
I think one big challenge about fighting back against China's military-civil fusion strategy and general tech offensive is that we haven't, as a system, quite caught up to how advanced Beijing is, and therefore the leverage it acquires and the risks of not only China stealing technology, but also the U.S. becoming increasingly dependent on Chinese technology. And the way that alongside, say, U.S. investment into the Chinese tech program and more concrete U.S. tech partnerships with China end up fueling our adversary. And because we haven't recognized that, as a system, we haven't imposed restrictions on things like tech licensing from Chinese entities that are very real threats. And one potential avenue that the U.S. could take is that where we, through FIAC restrictions, for example, impose barriers on U.S. tech partnerships with China, those could also cover tech licensing, patent partnerships, and other IP agreements, beyond simply formal joint ventures, formal export of technology, et cetera.
Thank you. So right now I'm chairing the subcommittee on antitrust, and we've been investigating kind of this cartel-like behavior in a number of U.S. industries where there's collusion. However, with foreign companies, you can have an American corporation working with someone in China, and it kind of falls into a different category. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, China's entire industrial, and we'll call it private sector, but it's not a private sector, is a cartel. Because fundamentally, Beijing and the Chinese Communist Party control them through incentive shaping and through directives, for lack of a better word. And that means that we should think of Chinese companies, including their outposts in the United States, as being arms of the Chinese system and colluding.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm out of time. I yield back.